All right, let's shift slightly from economics, which, by the way, I want to tell you that I think most of my audience, I think, is classically liberal or libertarian, I think is the big chunk of it. So I think they're going to be with you on a lot of this. So let's get to some stuff that I think that they may not be with you as much. So let's talk about borders and immigration for a second. So, or for a couple minutes at least. You're an open borders guy.
I am, yes.
So with everything going on in the world right now, give me your best pitch for open borders, which I am not
all right, with everything going on in the world. So first step is to say the stuff you see on the news is so statistically rare that no sensible person would even worry about it very much. So like terrorism, like on the news all the time, it is one of the smallest problems on earth. Right? So if you just go and look at the data and you will see, all right, so deaths from murder is like under 1% of all deaths, and terrorist murders under 1% of all murders. So why is it that people are so worried about it and we have spent over $1 trillion in the war on terror? Because it is vivid, because it is emotionally affecting. So I'd say like the first thing that we have to do is calm down and apply numeracy. And just like say like, here's a problem, everyone's worried about it. Is it really a serious problem that we should be concerned about or not? Right? And, you know, I say like terrorism is probably the strongest, most emotional critique people have of immigration, and yet it is not actually a sensible thing to be worried about.
But how much of it is because what we're doing is actually working? So that we know we're keeping out a certain amount of people who would love to come in here and blow things up and murder people.
So what I'd say is there's a lot of ways that we could go and test whether the stuff that we have is working. So there's a great political scientist, John Mueller, has a book called Overblown, going over all of it. So one thing we can do is just look at what are called near misses. So you can go and see, right, like how many terrorist plots are that failed, right? Which gives us an idea how much is what we're currently doing actually working.
So like the shoe bomber, for example.
Yeah, things like that. So when you go and expand the sample to all the failed cases. And especially when you go and look carefully, not just at things that the government classifies as terrorism so they can go and do a photo op, but things that actually, when you really look, it was an actual terrorist plot where they had where they had done something more than say, we should have a terrorist plot. Again, it still remains incredibly rare. Now, another test, this is actually one of my favorite ones, is for all the people who think that it's really easy to get in from Mexico, should mean that it's really easy for a terrorist to get in from Mexico. And yet the actual number that have done this is extremely small. In fact, I'm not sure there's been any case of any terrorists coming, crossing from Mexico and doing anything. So again, so if you are someone who thinks that the border is poorly guarded right now, then it doesn't make a lot of sense to think that current anti-terrorist policies are preventing a lot just because it's so easy for them to do this. Now, I would say that, or actually, our border is guarded very well in the sense that people pay about $4,000 to get smuggled across. So for the kind of people who are coming across the border, that's several years' income. It's a big deal. But it's a big deal for a rural Mexican farm worker, but it's not a big deal for a serious terrorist.
Right.
If you're a serious terrorist and you can't come up with $5,000 for your plot, then you're a joke. So I mean, I'd say look at that. So I think the idea that there really is a serious problem or that we have done much about it is, I think, just wrong. This is very again, the stuff on the news is the stuff that people really care about. Now, what is the case in favor of open borders?
Yeah.
Again, it's the kind of thing that you almost never see on the news. But there's the economic case and the human rights case. So the economics case is very simple. It just says that the very best way that we know of increasing the production of mankind is to move people from poor countries to rich countries. Right? It is almost like magic. You take a Haitian who's making $1 a day in Port-au-Prince, move to Miami, and suddenly he's making $40 a day. All right, so his productivity increases by a factor of 40. And you're like, how is that possible? Right? So he probably doesn't even speak English at first. He just speaks French. And the answer is his labor is extremely unproductive in Haiti and extremely productive in the United States. Even very unskilled workers produce far more in rich countries than they do in poor countries. Poor countries are screwed up in so many ways. So this is one of the most amazing things that you can do about poverty is to move people from poor countries to rich countries, and then overnight what they can accomplish multiplies, and not by 10% or 20%, by 5 times, 10 times, 20 times. It is amazing. And of course, right, if you understand the basics of trade, this doesn't just benefit the immigrant, it benefits everyone who's consuming that product. It benefits all the stuff that the immigrants make. I mean, right now, Haiti is pretty much irrelevant to the global economy. If you were to move those Haitians to Florida, suddenly the global economy would be richer by a very large amount. And again, a lot of the extra production would be consumed not just by the Haitians, but would be consumed by the people that are eating in the Haitian restaurants, by the people that are hiring Haitian nannies or Haitian gardeners. All these things that right now currently are not happening. Now, when economists have just tried to get an estimate, like how much are we losing from these border restrictions, from trapping all this valuable labor in poor countries, a pretty common estimate is that immigration restrictions are halving the production of the world. The world would be twice as rich if anyone could take a job anywhere. And again, just think like, what could you accomplish in Haiti? So you might be able to reset up the Rubin Report in Haiti.
Show in Haiti.
Yes, although you'd have trouble getting your guests.
Right.
But
my mortgage would be so cheap I could fly them in, I guess. There you go.
Maybe, yeah. So, but in general, most people, when you picture what could I do in Haiti, it's very little. Like it's the main difference between, between Haitians and Americans is that Haitians are stuck in Haiti, and yes, so it's true that their skills are low by American standards, but they can do so much more here than they can do back at home.
So what does when people say open borders, what does that actually mean? You mean that could people just wander in from Canada and Mexico all the time? Literally, are we shutting down the places that they walk through?
Well, so I would say that means that I would call that no borders.
Okay.
I'd be willing to defend that too, but that's not my main pitch. My main pitch is open borders, where the way I think about it is, unless someone belongs in jail, he can move to any country he wants. He can live there and he can work there. So, like, what
does that mean, though? So you're a Canadian. You want to come to the United States. You walk through the sanctioned border, even though you said you'd potentially be for the other thing. But you walk through. Are you a citizen that day?
No. So again, like I said, so you can live there, you can work there. It doesn't make you a citizen.
Right.
So like maybe you're never missed. So again, to me, the heart of open borders isn't citizenship. It's the right to live, the right and the right to work. Right. Which of course,
but could you do this for an unlimited amount of time? Because then, in effect, you're probably going to get all the rights of a citizen at some point.
You might, but so again, like I'm not against that, but again, that is not. But I'm also not strongly for that. What I'm strongly for is the right of any human being who doesn't belong in jail to live and work in any country that he wants. So again, I already mentioned the economic case. I mean, to me, the human rights case is basically one. Look, like this. This is a human being. He wants. There's someone who wants to rent him an apartment right here. There's someone who wants to hire him here. What business does any stranger have saying no? Right? I've compared immigration laws to Jim Crow laws. I said the main difference is that immigration laws are worse. Jim Crow laws said that there are some areas where blacks couldn't live in the United States. There are some jobs blacks couldn't take. What our immigration laws say is that if you are a Mexican citizen, there is no place in the country you can legally live, and no job in the country you can legally work. Right? That seems way worse than Jim Crow. And again, what's the difference? So between
you have to become a citizen, and then you can.
But becoming a citizen is almost impossible for someone who's born a Mexican citizen, unless of course you have a close blood relative. You are generally out of luck. I mean, sort of the idea of why don't they just go and get in line? The answer is, for most people on Earth who want to come, the line lasts hundreds of years. They could never legally come. Like the conditions for legal immigration, so like really, for if you were a low-skilled worker, it's pretty much limited to having a close blood relative already in the U.S. or marriage, right? And then there's a couple other ways of doing it, but those are extraordinarily rare. So for most people in the third world right now, there is no possibility they will ever be admitted, no matter what, right? And again, to me, it's like, well, why is it that because the person chose the wrong parents, they were born in the wrong country, that they have to be stuck living in Haiti their whole life? And again, so people can very easily see the injustice saying because someone is born black, you are stuck living in black areas of the United States, and you can only be a janitor, you can only go and you can only work as a porter on a train or something like that. And it's like, why is it that he has to be treated differently just because he chose the wrong parents? And to me, this argument is a very powerful one, in saying, well, how is that different from choosing to have Haitian parents? Of course, the point is no one chooses parents. You're just like it's something that happened before you're born. Why is it that a person, if he can go and find a willing landlord, find a willing employer, why can't he say yes to those jobs and come and live here and work here?
So would there be an inherent problem that if, you let all these people in, now they're not citizens per se, so they don't have the right to vote, but they're here, they're using our economy, they're contributing to our economy, all the good stuff that you said, that eventually we could get a situation where you might have parity of the amount of people that are voting and the people that are living here. That seems like it could become a problem.
Right. So, I mean, Again, I would say it's not clear why that's a problem. I mean, like one of the main things about immigrants is they tend to be apolitical. So when you move to a new country, normally like your concerns are, I got to find a good place to live, I got to go and get a job, take care of my kids, and getting involved in the politics of the country is usually the last thing on people's minds when they first come. I mean, one of the strangest complaints about immigrants to me is that they have low voting rates, and I say, well. So I mean, I've heard people say, well, first they vote the wrong way, and second of all, they don't vote. It's like, well, pick one of the two complaints at least.
Right.
In terms of what their kids will do. So again, under current U.S. law, there's birthright citizenship. So their kids would be, and what I would say there is, the United States has a long tradition of assimilating the children of immigrants. It's worked very well for American history. And people often think, well, yeah, it worked back when we really tried to assimilate them, but it doesn't work anymore. What I can say is for the things that we measure, things are as good now as they were in the Ellis Island days. So especially for language competence, it was never true.
But do we have something special here in America that they don't have in Europe? So for example, I agree with you that and I think there's a lot of evidence of it, that people still do assimilate more here. But where Europe is having a problem with assimilation, which is a culture problem, and that's different, right?
Right, so two things. First thing is I would say that a lot of the problems that people talk about are primarily problems on television. So there's an enormous amount of assimilation going in Europe, but that's not TV. You don't go and have a TV show saying, an enormous number of Pakistanis now like soccer and root for Manchester United and speak with British accents and have British jobs and do regular stuff. That's not a story. Whereas, here's a neighborhood, it's a no-go area where the regular British police dare not travel for fear of what might happen to them. Sharia law might come out any moment. Yeah. The scimitar might come out. That's a story. All right. So first step is always to separate scary stories from statistical reality. And what I say is it is true that Europe does a worse job of getting assimilation than the U.S. They still have a lot of assimilation. I remember like the last time I was in Paris, I was just amazed at all the assimilation that I saw just walking downtown and seeing people from all over the world, but they're looking and acting French. They're smoking cigarettes in a French way. It's like, wow, that guy,
eating cheese, drinking wine.
They're like, all right, and it's like, wow, that guy looks like he's from Chad or something like that, but he's he has like the turtleneck. So you actually see a lot of assimilation. It's true they have less assimilation, but you're saying, like, is there something special that we have? Say, there's something special we have is a more restrictive welfare state. So, so Europeans, so again, it varies a lot by country. It's important to realize that. But European countries in general do have much more expensive welfare states, especially that make it easier to be on welfare for your entire life.
Right.
And I think this does great harm to their assimilation, because one of the best ways of assimilating is to go to a job and to go interact with people that aren't from your culture. Even if, of course, a lot of the workers won't be, even if all the workers, if you go and work in a Chadian restaurant, even then a lot of your customers won't be from Chad, and so you will get to know them, you'll interact with them. Of course, you need to go and learn the language, but also you get to know people, and so this is the kind of assimilation that has been greatly undermined by European welfare states. Again, it's important to realize, so there's actually two kinds of things going on. One of them is a lot of free government money. Another one is labor market regulations that raise the price of labor, that make it hard to get a job. And you put those two things together, that's when you have a recipe for people living their whole life on it. So again, so you say, well, maybe they might like to get a job, but if it's really hard to get a job because of regulation and you get enough money to stay alive, that's where you are likely to say, fine, screw it, I'm just going to go and live in my ghetto, and I'll never even learn French, and I'm just going to stay here, and I'm going to be bitter.
So people think that those things are at odds with each other, open borders and a welfare state in a way, but basically you're saying if you open the border and you took away the welfare state at the same time, you actually would force assimilation.
Yes. So not literally force,
not force it, but create conditions.
Yeah, but the current system, especially in Europe, is heavily subsidizing non-assimilation, right? And I think that's a mistake. And again, I think it's a case where people so naturally scapegoat immigrants for the problem, when, again, like you say, well, we have some really crummy laws, which actually would lead to a lot of people to go, and of course, plenty of people who are native-born French who go back, who have their ancestors were Gauls. Plenty of people like this are also in France, sitting around, being supported by the welfare state for their entire life. Which again, so important to remember, it's not just people being lazy; it's also being very discouraged that the regulations make it so hard to get a job.
Yeah. So I get your point about forcing, once people are here and then we put them on this and then they're sort of stuck and that creates resentment and then people resent them for that and all that stuff. What about the culture part of it? That there's we do have to acknowledge that cultures are different, that they respect different things, they honor different things, not every culture is tolerant, and that we could eventually start bringing in people who are intolerant of our freedoms.
Right.
Regardless of whether that's overblown on the news or not. I get your point.
Yeah, so I think it is overblown. So, so again, theoretically possible, yes. But here's a striking thing. All over the world, in the most repressive countries, what is it that they feel about culture? They feel like America is destroying their culture. So in Iran, they've long had this word they call West toxification. West toxification is the idea there's all these horrible Western ideas flooding into Iran, alienating our children, destroying Islam. And here's what I say: they're right, because when like Western culture is awesome. People around the world love it, especially young people. And if governments around the world want to stop it, they have to resort to extreme measures in order to keep it out. Right? And what does immigration do? It brings the people brings people straight to the Western culture where their governments can no longer get between them and the culture. And the main thing that happens is that people go native. Right? So again, there's always some people on the news who are refusing to do it, but there's a much larger group of people who move to the West, and they may they may pay lip service to their home culture, but they actually go and assimilate to the new culture. I mean, here's my favorite test. If you want to go and find out how much assimilation is there, talk to any immigrant parent. And what will they tell you? The immigrant parents, do they say, oh yeah, my kid just loves Romanian culture. All he thinks about is Romania, Romania, Romania all day. Being Romanian is so central to his life. No. So yeah, my wife is from Romania. So the normal thing for a Romanian immigrant parent, just like almost any immigrant parent, is to say, I thought we could preserve our culture, but my kid just doesn't care about it. I talk to my kid in Romanian and they answer me back in English. My grandkids don't speak a word of Romanian. They have no interest in this stuff, right? And and if you say,
basically Americanism or Westernism will actually win.
Yes. So I have a blog post called "Western Civilization is a Hardy Weed," and says, look, I believe in Western civilization much more than most of the people who say they defend it, because I think we are winning right now, and I think with open borders we will win sooner, right? So this is the kind of thing where someone watching it in Iran might say, aha, I knew Caplan had a plot. Yes, and this is my plot. So yes, so I do think that Western civilization is the better civilization in most ways. I'm always happy to learn from other cultures and to have a cosmopolitan combination of all the best things. But nevertheless, I think that when we compile all the best things in the world, I think 80% of the stuff is going to come from Western civilization. So maybe we'll pick up the work ethic from China or something like that. We'll revitalize the work ethic. So I think they've got something to offer there. But my plan is to go and spread Western civilization more quickly and effectively through immigration. Right, and I'd say it is working right here, right now. Again, so even in Los Angeles, where people look around and say, I don't see people assimilating. Always look at, well, what is the generation of the immigrant? If it's a first-generation immigrant, then sure, they haven't assimilated. They never did.
Right.
It was never true that first-generation immigrants became fluent in English if they arrived in their 20s.
Right.
Right. They always had trouble. They always stuck to the old ways. Assimilation has always worked on the second generation. If you go and talk to a second-generation Mexican immigrant in LA, the odds that you'll speak fluent English are 90%. Right, and even kids who are first generation, as long as they came when they were young, so fluent English by far the norm. So again, I've just been going over this data. So again, the main reason why we feel like Hispanic immigrants aren't assimilating is just because in the past it was normal to have one generation wave of Germans and then it stopped.
Right.
One generation wave of Swedes or Italians and then it stopped. So then in a couple generations there's no longer any Italians in America who don't speak English. But it's not because the first generation learned English. It's because the first generation died and Italians stopped coming. So I don't see that when you understand what assimilation is about, it's about changing the second generation. It's still going on at enormous levels.
Yeah.
So we are anglicizing Latin America right now.
Yeah, the wave part of this is interesting because I think when people talk about the Ellis Island thing and they think of like the Lower East Side of Brooklyn, in New York City,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
in Brooklyn,
Yeah.
from 60 years ago when all these Irish and German and Jews and
Oh, yeah.
all these other people came, that it was that first generation that worked incredibly hard, barely spoke the language, lived more sheltered, and then the rest of what you said basically happened, and they moved throughout the thing.
Yes.
All right, let's do one more thing before I let you go. Pacifism.
All right.
Now, my policy on this, by the way, did not look at the notes once, which is a good interview.
All right.
So you've already done well. Pacifism.
Yes.
My particular policy on this is that I believe in a strong defense, basically so that we don't have to use it. I don't want a nation build.
Yes.
I don't think we should be all over the place creating empires and all that, but I do believe you need a strong defense so that people won't mess with you.
Yeah. So
How do you like that?
Yeah. Well, so if you want peace, prepare for war. Ancient Roman saying. So I just want to step back and say, so what is pacifism, and then what is the argument for it? So again, by pacifism, I don't mean never resisting violence. So I don't mean that if someone is coming at you with an axe, that you shouldn't fight back or anything like that. Rather, what I mean by pacifism is opposition to war, right? And organized violence organized by governments. And again, so how exactly is that different? And again, the answer is that war is actually almost never defensive, in the sense that war almost always involves either deliberately murdering or recklessly killing innocent people, right? So this, isn't it theoretically possible that it wouldn't be that way? Sure. But in practice, anytime you fight any kind of a serious war, you either wind up deliberately murdering a whole bunch of civilians, or you wind up recklessly endangering them, where you go and you drop a bomb in the general vicinity of a whole bunch of civilians and you kill them and say, well, collateral damage, what's the big deal? If the police fought crime the same way that the U.S. government wages war, the U.S. This would be way bigger protest than anything that we're getting right now. Because look, you need to go and so I'd say now. At minimum, it seems to me like there is some moral problem with war. So, which again is glossed over by the idea, we're just defending ourselves. Well, normally you're defending yourself by murdering a bunch of innocent people. So, at first glance, this seems like it's a problem. People often want to say, no, there's no innocence on the other side. It's like, there's no innocent babies in the other country. There's no one who's never done anything. Seems like this is a pretty flimsy defense. And then there's also anyone we kill is totally on the hands of the bad guys that we're fighting against. And it's like, so really? So, what if you went and bombed people in the neighboring country? Would that be on the hands of the bad guys too? Why exactly is it that, is there some limit to what you can blame on the bad guys? I mean, it's one thing if you've got someone holding a hostage right there and they're shooting. But again, what if, say, there's a school next to a criminal? Can you go and bomb the school because, well, that's on him? The fact that we killed all the kids in that school, that's sad, but we were just trying to get that one murderer. Saying, well, hey, that seems like a very flimsy defense. Now, again, so I am actually never an absolutist. So I'm always willing to say, all right, maybe we have to do this terrible thing for the greater good, right? So I always want to be open to that argument. But that's where I say, all right, well, let's actually go and carefully look at how great is this good, and how certain can you really be that you got it. So, just to back up. The argument for pacifism. The first step is just accepting the harsh reality that war is not really defensive. It does involve actually going and murdering, or at least manslaughtering, a whole lot of innocent people. And no matter the nicest country that wages war, the most careful one does this. That with modern weaponry, it would be hard to do otherwise.
Can that be in and of itself moral though? In the case of World War II, where we weren't our homeland, Pearl Harbor, but our homeland wasn't threatened by the Nazis per se. We killed a lot of people, and the Allies firebombed Dresden and all that. But we also then saved a lot of lives. So
again, that's next step. But again, first step is just accepting that the United States government murdered a lot of innocent people. The United States government murdered children, right? They did the kind of thing that we attack terrorists for, which is murdering a bunch of innocent people because you think it's for the greater good. And again, normally when we say terrorists are terrible people for this, we don't have some big factual argument about how what they're doing isn't really for the greater good. It's like, you murdered innocent people. That's a terrible thing to do, right? So it's just there's at least a moral presumption against this, which maybe can be overcome again for the greater good. But that's where I say that so there's this great philosophical example involving a doctor who's got 5 patients who each need a different organ donation. And then a guy walks by who happens to be perfectly healthy, and the doctor thinks, maybe I should go and murder that guy and harvest his organs. And then he searches, he has no family, no one's really going to miss this guy. I can save 5 lives by murdering 1 person. Seems like a good idea. All right, now people's normal reaction to this is that's horrible, and then if you start ramping
I'd
up
want
the
to
numbers,
know a little more about the guy.
Start ramping up the numbers. Maybe it's 1 million people. All right, that's fine. But anyway, at least that 5-to-1 ratio seems to really bother people, and say no, you can't go and deliberately murder a person to save 5 other people. All right, so it is this premise that I bring in my case against war, saying, look, all right, now maybe that there's a war for the greater good, but are you actually getting something like this 5-to-1 ratio? Right? And furthermore, how confident can you really be? And that's where I bring in the last body of evidence, which is that people's predictions about the results of war are terrible. So again, the whole idea of prediction is you have to say what you think is going to happen before it happens, and then you look at what occurs and see how accurate your prediction was.
Yeah.
All right, so there is a fantastic political psychologist named Phil Tetlock who ran a big experiment along these lines. So in the 1980s, he went and asked a bunch of foreign policy experts their predictions, and then 20 years later came back and weighed their predictions against the actual results, and they did really badly. Right? And so this is experimental evidence on people's ability to forecast the actual long-run benefits of war are very poor. Of course, we don't really need to do experiments. We can just go to the views about what would have happened in World War I, where all sides are saying out of the trenches by Christmas. No one is saying, I think this will end in communist revolution. And certainly no one was saying, well, I think the long-run result of this will be a communist regime in North Korea, a country that doesn't even exist right now.
Right.
And yet, if you know your history, that is that is the key event in why there's communism in North Korea. So now, if you snap these pieces together, so moral presumption against war, 5-to-1 ratio, something like that minimum in order for it to be justified. And then finally, great uncertainty about what the effects of war are. That's where I get my case for pacifism. It's like anytime there is a war, anytime there is someone proposing a war, my reaction is, all right, so, like, first of all, so is it even plausible that you are going to save 5 times as many lives as you are going to murder here? Mm-hmm. And is it reasonable to be that confident given how bad most people's track records are?
Right.
And if you put that together, then I say that for almost any actual war, it's really hard to make the case in its favor.
So let's say there were, some terrorists in Tijuana firing rockets into San Diego, where you're going in a couple of days.
Right.
And they keep firing these rockets, or they're sending people in to shoot people in San Diego or something. You would be for doing something about that. That's not
you're taking police action. Absolutely, like normal police action, not bombing Tijuana. I mean, I think that's a case where as long as they were Muslim terrorists in Tijuana, I don't even think most Americans would favor bombing Tijuana. Even if the Mexicans were floundering around and couldn't figure out what to do, I don't, so as long as the Mexicans said, you can go and send in American troops to deal with this, but don't go bombing us, don't go machine gunning whole villages of people.
Right.
So I have no objection to anything like that. But anytime someone starts talking about waging war with modern weaponry, where you're going to start murdering, where you inevitably murder or manslaughter, right? Again, so of course, to be murder, you have to be trying to kill them. Manslaughter is just when you recklessly endanger them. But anytime you're talking about something like that, that's where my pacifist scruples get in the way. And again, this is another case where when someone fights a war and it ends really badly, then it's like, well, what can you do? But if someone opposes a war and it ends really badly, it's like, pacifism is a terrible idea. They're like this is like people like you have caused all these problems. So I would say, look, I think it is a fair historical point to say almost every historian or anyone who knows any facts about World War I to say, look, it just would have been better if any one of the major powers had just surrendered. If any one of the major powers in World War I had just said, look, we give in, you win, we'll do what you want. And that would have prevented so many terrible things, most obviously World War II. And yet people will say, well, look, pacifism would have led to disaster in World War II. Well, if we'd been pacifists, there wouldn't have been a World War I. So maybe we should get credit for that. Right?
It's almost like actions lead to other actions.
Actions lead to other actions. Now, again, notice what I'm not claiming that we have no clue at all about what a war will do.
Yeah.
So the uncertainty by itself doesn't really argue for or against war. It's the uncertainty combined with this high threshold. Of saying you've got to actually know that you're saving 5 times as many lives as you're killing before we should even be talking about this. And that's where the uncertainty is hard because is a barrier to war, because like saying it's a close call. Well, like so, saying pacifism says all close calls go to peace. You don't fight if it's a close call because you're murdering innocent people. So there's a very high threshold responsibility. Again, so higher even than the one of if you're spending taxpayer money, you ought to know you're really doing something good with it.
Right. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed this. We barely got into half of what I was going to talk about, but we're going to do this again. How about that?
All right, awesome. Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I hope you guys did too. And for more of Bryan's work, you can check out bcaplan.com, and it's Caplan with a C, so it's bcaplan.com.